Hi everyone and welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we talk with the movers and shakers that are redefining the future of commercial aviation. As usual, before we start, let me remind you once more that all previous episodes of this podcast, as well as many other aviation stories, are available on the Allplane website. That's Allplane.tv, Allplane.tv. Today we're going to take a bit of a panoramic view of the industry, because our guest is Ivan Terekhov, who is the head of research and intelligence at TNMT, the research arm of Lufthansa Innovation Hub, which is part of the German airline of the same name, and it has the task of identifying promising new technologies in the travel and commercial aviation space. TNMT publishes regularly research reports and newsletters about the state of aviation and travel technology, tracking the main trends, and not shying away from expressing often very strong but very well-grounded opinions about some of the most hyped technologies of our time. So I couldn't pass this opportunity to ask Ivan to share some details about the methods that they use at TNMT in order to evaluate the prospects of success of each of these new technologies. And also, I asked him to focus on those technologies that are likely to have a more direct impact on the aviation industry, such as electric and hydrogen propulsion, but also supersonic airliners, even airships, and of course sustainable aviation fuel and advanced air mobility. But I think it's best if we hear it all directly from Ivan. So without further ado, let me welcome him to the podcast. Hello, Ivan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I'm very happy to have you here on the podcast because you are leading one of the, let's say, information sources that I consider fundamental to understand what's going on in the field of technology, aviation technology, and travel technology in general. And that's TNMT, which is affiliated with the Lufthansa Innovation Hub, which the name gives away. It's also linked to the famous airline. But we are going to go in detail now about how you guys are structured, how you work, and what you do. But first of all, can you tell us a little bit in a few lines who you are and what's your role at TNMT?
Sure. Quite happy to do so. Thank you for the intro. So, just very quickly, maybe about myself. Originally, I'm from Moscow, but I was involved in all aviation topics from from my student days. So I was studying at the Moscow Aerospace University for 6 years in the field of actually aircraft design, but more specifically operations research. So it's basically field of applied mathematics on how to build the planes. And not just only that, but also how to optimize the operations and everything regarding operations and efficiency and different mathematical models, which was a lot of fun. But after university, I eventually joined German Aerospace Center. So for my PhD, which I've done quite successfully, it also was about the future technologies in the aviation field and how it will impact the future of sustainability in our industry. It was very interesting projects. We worked a lot, for example, with IATA and other players on the market. So it was quite good.
It's called DLR, yeah?
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
The German, it's for Deutsche
Lufthansa.
Oh, okay. That's there you say it. Yeah, no, I know because when I write articles about innovation topics, that's an institution that has come up repeatedly. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was exciting time. I was part of the Institute of Air Transportation Systems in Hamburg, in Germany. And it was a very interesting time because we were looking into all different new technologies, back in 2012, when we still were thinking, kind of a new Tesla innovation will come and disrupt Airbus and Boeing. Well, that's something we were talking about, but you see, I'm still waiting. And also was a time when we were working on the first models to understand how air taxis actually can work, or how we're going to operate them, which was very interesting time, I would say.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about the flying taxis. I know the industry, they hate this flying taxi name. Advanced air mobility. We're gonna talk about that because that's one of the topics that you've been doing research in, and I think it's one of the things that I think deserve further scrutiny. But yeah, sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt you. So then you move on to the TNMT from there?
No, actually, okay. I was in academia. It's academic environment was quite interesting, but I wanted to have some a little bit more dynamics, so I joined a couple of startups in between. So maybe Free now. like a taxi?
Yes, of course. Just a note here for whomever might not be familiar. It's an application to basically to order a taxi. I think in Germany, it's very popular, possibly number one. I'm not sure. In other European countries, pretty well used as well.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how it compares in terms of market share with Uber on other applications, but I think it's pretty big.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I spent there almost 2 years. I was a part of the data team and I led a marketplace analytics team. So basically, all these things about the dynamic pricing and allocation algorithm. So basically, when you call a taxi, which one has to come to you? And also we worked with the dynamic pricing, like when the price is changing and things like that. So it was pretty interesting. But then eventually I moved to like Statista, another kind of startup. I don't know, maybe you heard about this. It's kind of Netflix for data.
It comes up in the search results every time you look for some data point.
That's right. I mean, they're quite good in this.
Yeah.
So and collecting data as well. So it was a very exciting time. But after maybe a year or two, so I come back to aviation, which I'm quite happy about, and I joined Innovation Hub and became director for research and intelligence, which is very interesting. It's kind of continuation of my work, which I used to do in DLR.
You guys do a lot of in-depth research about topics that are very current in the aerospace innovation industry. You have a newsletter that you are sending out every couple of weeks, something like that?
Bi-weekly, every 2 weeks.
Yes. And actually, I had the chance to collaborate with one of the editions that you guys did together with Aerotime, which is one of the media platforms I collaborate with on a regular basis. And there was this joint newsletter edition that went out about a month ago. That was also very, very interesting. But I knew about your newsletter before that, and I've been long a subscriber because you've got really, really interesting data and analysis there about things that you hear about a lot. I'm going to talk about hype later on because advanced air mobility hype, that's one of the topics I would like to touch upon. You guys dissect some of the, let's say, hype topics that are out there, and you provide some context and some data and some hard analysis to see what's real, what's hype, and put things in their proper context. So how you guys work? I mean, are you organized? You have a fully dedicated research team? How you choose the topics? Tell me a bit more about how you guys work at TNMT. And also would be interesting to learn as well, what's your link with the broader Lufthansa Innovation Hub system? Because I know there are different teams doing different things as well.
Sure. I mean, I think I will start with a little bit bigger picture about the Innovation Hub itself. So why do we exist? I mean, because we want to understand and be ready for the future. Yeah, because everything is changing within the travel and mobility industry, and it's important to capture and prepare ourselves for that. And why basically Lufthansa in general? You would ask, like, why Lufthansa? Why do we do this kind of research, and why actually Hub is part of the Lufthansa group? I mean, the main thing here is that everything is changing again. Yeah, there are so many things are happening within this customer journey and things which impact the customer journey. For example, like substitution, for example, we use video call, right? Maybe, I don't know, in the past we will travel, or I will go, I don't know, Barcelona, or you will join me somewhere here in Germany or whatever.
Yeah, well, we still do a fair bit of traveling, but yeah, of course.
Yes, but I mean, you see, there are things which are impacting our behavior. So it's also some new competition. I mean, for example, if eVTOLs or some electric aircraft, I mean, how they will impact the future behavior of travelers, how it will impact our future fleet, and all these questions. Of course, I mean, and we have to be ready for that. So that's one of the reasons why we're here, just to get this understanding and get ready for the future. And the future, I'm talking about 10, 20, 30 kind of long-term perspective. And to do so, we have Innovation Hub, and basically we have 3 teams within the Innovation Hub, so capabilities, we say capabilities. The first one is the research team. That's the team research and intelligence, or strategic intelligence, because research is just a part of our day-to-day work. So we try to understand the trends. We try to sense signals of emerging trends and monitor the market, technologies, behavior, startups, like investments, and all things around that. The second team is our new business team. So they, inspired by our input, build new ventures, mainly digital, because light assets, easier to implement, and the cycle is much faster. to fail. And the third one is our transformation team, which helps us to communicate innovations and set the innovation mindset in the group itself, in the Lufthansa group, and because they're an enormous group, so many people. And we're fairly a small team, I would say.
Based in Berlin. You're all
Yes.
of you based in Berlin, yeah? You are in Berlin because Berlin is where, let's say, like the hub of all these German innovation scene.
It's definitely a great environment for the startups. I mean, Berlin is famous for that. And the reason for Innovation Hub to be there, it's the same. I mean, first of all, it's a little bit of distance from the headquarters. I mean, it gives us space to think more and just try to come up with some unexpected maybe solutions or some new ideas. And of course, in interacting with ecosystem definitely helps us to do so, which is quite nice to organize different events or just easier to talk and communicate with people within the startup environment there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are the key topics that have really been catching your attention recently? One of them we're going to talk about now is advanced air mobility, but which other topics have been keeping you awake at night? I don't know if that's maybe a bit too dramatic, but what the things that really get your mental broadband at the moment?
Yes, of course. There are some topics which are quite interesting. Of course, I mean, I will not put in this list the advanced air mobility. It's, of course, we do this and looking at this developments, which is quite interesting. First point, of course, I mean, I think everyone is talking about like generative AI, right? So what does it mean? What does it mean for travel? And that's something we try to understand as well. So we try to observe what's happening in this market, what kind of startups, what kind of ideas. So, well, we don't see much travel-related cases yet. I mean, mainly it's travel planning and some chatbots, so introduced by some companies. But we're still observing. I think industry need to catch up on this.
But I think the travel planning thing, it's huge. I mean, if it changes the way that people search for this information and books stuff, and the way that these systems pulled information from different sources, etc., can have very significant implications, just as when Google appeared and people started searching differently and coming up with different ways of finding information. So even if it's just only that, it's going to be really big. Yes.
I mean, of course, it's right now it's quite early stages because we see so many different applications or tools to do this trip planning, which is quite interesting to see. But I think it's quite stormy time in the very beginning, and we need to give a little more time to get the situation stabilized. But it's definitely something interesting, and we're also like running some research, trying to understand, where actually that might fit in the future of travel and mobility industry, because we're not talking only about heavy assets, but also about customer behavior and things like that. But you were asking about the topics which don't give me a good sleep. I mean, I think another one is metaverse, which is kind of semi-forgotten right now. I think it might bring some interesting developments. We still need to observe it and to see how it will interact with the generative AI, because it might be additional booster for these topics. But I don't believe it's going to be like we're going to live in the metaverse, but some elements will probably become true. And then will impact somehow our travel behavior. And the last but not least, from kind of not really technical topics, is customer behavior or people, how they travel post-COVID era. Because we see all this additional requests on flexibility, and people value more flexibility now rather than price. As you know, like the prices are going up, but we still have very high demand on travel. And it's all very interesting developments with which we're observing. For example, we were working a lot on the trend, we call it blur travel, when we see that people are going for the longer time to some destinations and they work from there, but at the same time, it's kind of holiday time for them, which is interesting to see. And we definitely see it's getting up. It's one of our research we've done last year. So I think this like 4 main topics, something we are looking at currently.
Yeah, I remember over the last few months, you were releasing, I think, a 7 or 8 part series where you basically analyze also different, let's say, new technologies that are being pitched as a future alternatives to transform the way we travel by air. Different, very diverse things like supersonic flight, a new generation of aircraft, supersonic flight, for example, airships, which you were very critical about. So you were very, very very strict on analyzing each of them and finding the pros and cons, which I found really interesting. I'm going to post a link in the show notes so that people can check it out, because that's definitely something that it requires sitting down for some time and going through each of them. And it's quite amazing because it's an industry that was following very incremental steps for many decades. And now we've got this kind of boom of all these people trying very different things that are completely different technologies that take us on completely different paths. So I would like to ask you about each of them and to get your view, which ones you find more interesting and with better perspectives over the long term. Let's start by supersonic flight, because there have been a couple of startups trying to do, again, supersonic flight, which is not entirely new. There was a Concorde, there was a Soviet supersonic airliner, but that never really worked as expected. And now there are some companies that are trying to do it again, and let's say this time is different. So what's your take on that, supersonic?
Yeah. Personally, first of all, I would say I love the idea of the technology to fly faster than speed of sound, but being pragmatic and looking after the data, well, I don't believe it's going to happen again. So, just first of all, it's a really wrong time for supersonic aircraft, because in the age of sustainability concerns, well, it's not the right thing to do. Society will not accept it in the way.
Even if flying with SAF.
Who will fly on the supersonic with SAF? It's the ultra rich people, most likely. And then again, society will say what? What are we doing? Why do we spend so much SIF on ultra rich people for supersonic flight instead of put them into the A320, for example? Too many concerns and too many black boxes on the way to realize this technology. Moreover, talking about the boom supersonic, when they lost their engines, I would say, contract with the Rolls-Royce. I think if it was Rolls-Royce, I'm not really sure.
I think so. I'll need to check, but I think so.
But so basically they have no engines. And I think they decided to do it themselves. Well, I don't think that it will come in 2 or 3 years as they promised. And I think that's basically the end of supersonic ideas to realize this flight for commercial reasons. Of course, if it will take some military things or, I'm not really sure that even for business aviation, it will be the case. That's why, we looked in the media, we looked into the data competition, and it doesn't seem to be a good solution for us.
Okay, let's move next to electric propulsion. By electric, I don't mean just the eVTOLs, which I'm going to ask you about separately, but electric for conventional takeoff and landing. Yeah. Now there's a number of startups trying to do regional aircraft. They promise to be flying by the end of this decade. Do you see this realistic?
Well, I would say yes, something will fly by the end of the decade. I don't think it's going to be like massive passenger transportation anytime soon. I love the topic. I love the idea of electric aircraft. I think it's fascinating. I love that so many different companies and startups started to work on it. But again, I think already in your podcast, maybe Tom Vroyman, I think, mentioned this.
Yeah.
The main problem is payload, of the electric aircraft.
Yeah.
How many people you can transfer? Now the range is about 200-300 kilometers.
What about breakthroughs in battery technology? Do you see this happening? Not in the next decade, not in maybe the next 2 decades, but if we look at 50 years time, maybe. I know it's difficult to tell so much in advance. So,
well, I would say in this case, it's good approach is scenario technique. If we'll say the business as usual and just batteries developing how they're developing now, and in 20, 30 years, we're going to have good capacities. Well, I would say in this case, of course, it will take a lot of routes, long range or mid-range routes, hopefully. And that will definitely help our efforts on sustainability side of things. Because if you look right now, it's on the ranges under 500 kilometers currently right now. Our airplanes, our jets, A320 and so on, under 100 seats, I think they contribute about 4% of CO2 emissions or even less. if we do the step to 1,500 500 kilometers ranges, then we'll cover, I think, around 20% of CO2 emissions we have currently. So you see, I mean, this step is very important, and then it's definitely will be visible contribution into the CO2 efforts. So I hope it will work. I mean, I hope the batteries will evolve. I mean, the price will probably go up, so it will not be, it will be more expensive than now to travel, but hopefully to acceptable level. And plus electric aircraft will contribute into the sustainability effort from our sector in aviation.
Okay. And also related to electric, but in a much more narrow use case, is the eVTOLs, where the range is not so important, but there are other considerations here. The use cases, for example, the cost to compete with land transportation, access points, even regulation to have all sort of flying things above our heads in cities, which is not clear it's going to be approved by the local authorities. So what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, again, we looked into all the data, how people are looking at this. I mean, I can tell you my story. So back in 2016, I believe, we started to look into the air taxis. And honestly, I was so overexcited about the air taxis, and especially like, I think it was Uber Elevate, which were promising like we're going to fly like next year, but it never happened. It's not just, okay, I mean, to make something fly, like a concept is, honestly speaking, is not a big deal. Of course, I mean, there's some engineering challenges, but you can make one thing fly. Now we come to the point when like companies claim that they want to produce a lot of these vehicles. They want to fly like, I don't know, every 10 or 15 minutes or so. And then there's so many questions. Okay, how are we actually going to operate? Are these companies going to operate or someone else is going to be operating? What about the airports or vertiports? How they're going to be designed? What about security? What about the airspace? Especially like when people saying like, oh, we're going to do like, I don't know, like thousands of operations in a given period of time. And you're thinking like, wow, I mean, these things are going to fly. Like, I mean, visual noise, I mean, just noise. I mean, I mean, security, I mean, it's going to fall down on the people's heads. I mean, it's like, you remember the case, I think in New York, there was a company in the 80s, helicopter company.
Yeah, I think.
Which was operating, I forgot the name.
I think it was the Pan Am was flying a shuttle service, I think.
Yeah, and I think there was like one accident which kind of stopped all the operations in New York for this kind of service. And imagine what will happen with the eVTOLs. Like one accident or something will just put the big cross on all these things. But then, I mean, we're talking about the economy. Well, I mean, where are they going to find so many pilots? Because I don't believe that autonomous flight is going to come anytime soon, like not within the 5 years for sure.
I'm working on an article precisely now about this, about the training of eVTOL pilots, because from what I've seen so far is not very well defined. There is no framework at the moment for this.
That's right. I mean, in this kind of like black boxes again, you know, like, I mean, there's unknown situations. There's so many of them. And it's just simply not realistic to solve all these things and certification process, right? Which takes, I mean, it take many years, a lot of money. And we see that they are short on cash right now, all this, like the most promising startups like Volocopter, Lilium, whatever. And of course, I mean, they claim kind of, we're going to start soon, which is fair enough. I mean, probably they will be able to start soon, but it looks like it's going to be more on the luxury side, kind of additional service for helicopters, kind of first-class passengers, last-mile delivery to somewhere. You know, I mean, probably it will go into this direction first. And then later on, who knows? Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I don't believe in the massive operations in the near future for the eVTOL companies.
Okay.
I mean, it simply doesn't really work from an economic point of view and engineering and operational hurdles we have.
I'm not going to ask you about airships because you wrote a very damning report, very critical of the whole concept of. I
mean, just 2 words: blast from the past.
Yeah.
I mean,
although
one little thing. I mean, when we were doing the research about the airships, so every time when you looked like which the most cited articles or what they're talking about this catastrophic event of Heidelberg in the United States. Still, like 20% of articles about airships referring to this event. Well, I mean, it's hard to
although I must say I was quite skeptical as well, but I had on the podcast the CEO of hybrid air vehicles, for example, that is designing this airship that's going to be primarily for cargo. And actually, well, I don't know, maybe for some niche cases, I don't know, but I haven't run the numbers. So,
I mean, I'm talking here about the transportation, like passenger transportation.
yeah.
I don't know, maybe some luxury hotel somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
one case, but it's not for passenger transportation. How we,
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, fair enough. Maybe some specific like cargo operations. Yeah, why not?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to take an airship to go, I don't know, from Hamburg to Barcelona, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are some very impressive pictures though, of these
yeah.
airships over cities. That's
I mean, usually marketing materials are very
yeah.
impressive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't understand me wrong. I love to see the huge thing in the sky. But
Yeah.
again, thinking about pragmatical point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that takes us to the next point, which is hydrogen propulsion,
Oh, yeah, hot
which is
topic.
one of the favorites for, let's say, the medium and long haul passenger transportation.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting because when I kind of first faced hydrogen concept, I also was like kind of really like, wow, yeah, it's gonna take us somewhere. But honestly speaking, looking deeply, definitely need some more research on that. I mean, like fundamental research on this technology. So there is still a lot of unknowns. There are big question actually about sustainability of hydrogen. So when we talk about the blue and gray hydrogen, I mean, of course, the best solution is the green hydrogen, but of course, it's the most expensive one for now. I mean, and how it will develop in the future, we still need to have a lot of years ahead to take time to do the research and construct maybe some hydrogen cases. Yeah, and it's exciting, it's interesting, it's definitely something new. But definitely needs some additional research, especially if we talk as well about non-CO2 emissions. Well, I mean, contrails, how it will impact the environment, how it will, how it's going to be. So too many questions again, which are kind of hard to answer right now. I know that it's a hot topic. I mean, we want to believe that hydrogen will save us, but I mean, to get to this level, we need to invest a lot into the research first.
True. So that leaves us with sustainable aviation fuel, SAF.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the outcome of the study because it seems like SIF, that's going to be a solution for this transition period. Let's, again, consider a scenario business as usual that hydrogen will come aircraft maybe in 30, 40 years or so. And then electric aircraft also will come to this mid-ranges. But yes, sustainable aviation fuel is something we're going to use. I mean, and it works. We don't need to modify infrastructure that drastically, like for hydrogen or even for electric aircraft. It will provide us hopefully a smooth transition to the new technologies in the future. And it's just obviously something we need to use right now if we want to go to the more sustainable future. And it's definitely something many companies are working on, and it's definitely like the volume and the prices will a little bit go down. But again, it will be the travel in the future. I think it's going to be more expensive than now, but and to acceptable level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it will require a big ramp up of production, which I guess it's technically doable if there is a commitment to move in that direction. So, and then all the rest will follow, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's again the current fleet constellation. Yes, so I think right now we have about 30,000 aircraft, the world fleet, right? I mean, Airbus and Boeing, they have orders for about like 15,000 aircraft right now. And take into account the retirement age of the aircraft of, let's say, like 25, 30 years. So you'll see that it takes long time to substitute the fleet, even what we have right now. So it will take, I don't know, like next 40 years just to add something new into there.
Indeed.
If it's going to stay the same. I mean, it's interesting, but we have to be ready for the future. We need to understand the sustainable aviation fuel. That's the thing we need to use now. I mean, even mixing with like providing some mixtures, it's already a good thing, which will help us to reduce our CO2 emissions.
Yeah, indeed. But there's one in particular that I found really interesting from the point of view of perspective, because it's something that is entirely new and different, and that has many use cases that are not totally clear now, which is advanced air mobility. You follow a methodology which is called Gartner Hype Cycle Analysis, which is not exclusive of the aviation industry. I mean, Gartner is a large consultancy firm that analyzes technology and a whole range of industries. They follow this methodology, and you follow this methodology as well, to analyze the prospects of a specific new industry, like in this case, advanced air mobility. If you look at advanced air mobility in particular, where are we now in the Gartner hype cycle? And what are the perspectives in the short to medium term, and also in the longer term, if we look at maybe 10 to 20 years into the future? By the way, let me start by saying, like, the Gartner hype cycle, you can graph this hype cycle with a line that moves along two axes, one that shows time and the other the level of excitement that a new technology brings about. At the start, there are big expectations, and the hype line goes up until it reaches a so-called peak of inflated expectations, when basically the wonderful future that everyone was awaiting fails to materialize, and then the hype deflates. The line goes down to the so-called trough of disillusionment, but during all this time, people keep working on this new technology, improving it, and finding suitable applications for it. So slowly but steadily, expectations increase again. This is the so-called slope of enlightenment, and the line continues to go up, but on a more gentle slope, until the technology reaches maturity and it becomes mainstream. So this is the so-called plateau of productivity. Which is something that we saw, for example, with the internet and all this boom in the early 2000s. Then there was this big crash, but then a few companies then later emerged, and now we use the internet for pretty much everything. And many of the companies that survive actually are now really, really huge and profitable businesses. So applying this methodology, where are we now in terms of advanced air mobility?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, it's actually was a very, very interesting research in general, and trying to understand. But I mean, just how everything started with this hype cycle. It also will answer your previous question, how actually we selected the topics. Actually, we just had a conversation because with my colleague, and we were talking like, oh yeah, air taxis, like supersonic, and then we had like different opinion when it's going to come actually. And we have different opinions on these technologies. And then we started to think like, why do we have different opinions? Because we read the same things, more or less.
Yeah, we had different opinions here in this podcast as well, because I've got some guests that are in the industry, or they are very bullish on this industry. And then I've got some other guests that are also very, very well informed and very up to date with all technology things. And they are very critical. And both sides have very valid arguments in favor and against. So it's difficult to make sense of it all.
Yes, I mean, and then we got an idea. I mean, let's try to find a framework where we can accommodate all this like technologies, all these trends somehow, and be able to compare with each other. And and we were looking, and we're like, okay, Gartner hype cycle seems to be a good one, because as you said, many people talk different things. Like some of them very optimistic, some of them really pessimistic, and we decided, okay, we should not take into account only technological side, but also like what people are talking about. And then Gartner hype cycle was the perfect match, I would say, for this particular task. And again, saying about the hype cycle, it's basically two curves, right? I mean, first, it's, as you said, hype. It's just one hype in the beginning of the technology, like basically example, generative AI right now. So it's a super hype. But then when we come closer to the actually business or engineering maturity, and then people understand, well, we need some time to develop the technology, like physically, like engineering work. Then it's getting boring, and people don't really talk much about this. So hype goes down, but we still need to work on the technology itself. Yeah. So, and then we decided, okay, let's put it on. Let's put this on the hype cycle. And then we also had a lot of discussions, but we we always try to base our analysis on data. So, and we collected some data, which helped us to place all the trends on the curve. First of all, like how people talk about the technology, like how many, for example, articles actually about, I don't know, supersonic aircraft or sustainable aviation fuel. So how many articles actually are out there, and like year over year growth. And for some cases, you clearly can see that is changing. The same as like we looked into the Google Trends, which straightforward, very simple thing to have a look, but it gives some interesting insights on that. Also, we looked from the technical perspective and maturity of the technology itself, for example, different patents. And last but not least, we collected over the years a very nice database of all startups within the TNMT. Not all, I hope, most of them, which helps us to understand the investments into the particular startups in particular field, the developments within these companies, and so on. So to understand the competition itself. And taking all the different perspectives, merging it into one, helped us to bring this hype cycle to life, which I think is very insightful. I mean, of course, there are different opinions, like where to put this particular trends, but I personally believe we try to make it as much data-driven as possible in order to justify why do we see these trends in this particular place of the curve. And talking about advanced air mobility in general, like if we'll combine all the trends maybe together and see like, okay, where is that? I mean, in my opinion, it's after the hype, like hype is more or less over. We're in the down curve, in my personal opinion.
I have started seeing some articles talking about the financial performance of the operators that have gone public via SPAC, and also some more critical articles lately about the prospects of advanced air mobility.
Yes, I mean, especially if you look into the investments, VC numbers, I mean, compare different years. So we see that it's like going down over the years. So 22 was definitely less investments than 21, which was a quite exceptional one. But we see this dynamics, which like not so much money going into this industry anymore. So money are not cheap anymore. So,
at the same time, I'm not sure whether this is a hype that it's happening only inside the industry, but in the, let's say, the broader world, when I talk with people that are not so much following the aviation and aerospace news, there is not so much awareness of everything that's going on in this space. So I don't know up to which point the hype is behind, or there might be a hype when when these things start really becoming a real thing and everyone starts like, wow, what's this new thing? There's a possibility of having like let's say a quote unquote public hype where like it becomes mainstream and then goes through the same cycle. I don't know, just an hypothesis here.
Well, I mean, can be. I mean, I'm not really sure like that completely new things will come the next 10 years or so. And thinking about public hype, well, yeah, can be, but I still think it will follow more or less the same pattern we observe right now. I don't think there will be changes. I mean, we are talking about like next 10, maybe 20, 30 years max. I mean, I'm not really sure what will be in 2090 or something. Like 20 years.
So if we have the Gartner hype cycle methodology, you have first the technology trigger, which is the ascendant phase of this technology where it's being hyped and everyone is really hot and everyone wants in. Then there's something called the peak of inflated expectations. People start questioning whether the assumptions were real, then go through this disillusionment where people are a bit disappointed by all these expectations that have failed to materialize. And then we get to this thing called the slope of enlightenment, where basically all let's say the good projects are sorted from the bad projects, and the good projects start raising again, and until they get to a plateau of productivity, becoming mainstream, and it doesn't grow as fast, but it's there. It's not disappearing. Would you say we have reached the peak of inflated expectations on advanced air mobility?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like really correct to speak about the entire advanced air mobility topic where it is. I mean, if I have to say, I would say it's after the peak of inflated expectations. But I would rather consider like each trend individually, because they're quite different, honestly speaking.
What do you mean by each trend?
By each trend, I mean, when we look into the hype cycle itself in technologies we considered, I mean, we call technologies the trend. For example, sustainable aviation fuel, airship, hydrogen aircraft, electrics, and everything mentioned in there.
Every one of these technologies has, of course, its own cycle and its own drivers. One of the common drivers is sustainability, of course. Like everyone is striving now to fly in a cleaner way. The other one possibly is the availability of investment. There seems to be kind of more open-mindedness on the investment side to consider disruptive projects, things like eVTOL flying taxis, again, airships, etc., supersonic flight, even hypersonics. I had here on the podcast an entrepreneur that is doing an hypersonic aircraft, which is an order of magnitude more disruptive than even than a supersonic flight. All these projects, all these different hype cycles are driven by some common underlying trends in our society, or let's say on the financial markets, that have made them all flourish more or less at the same time.
Well, I mean, I think underlying thing which we can observe in every trend is sustainability. When you look at this each trend, actually everyone is talking about sustainability in a way. So it is definitely a common trend across all these different technologies. How they will impact sustainability, how is it going to be a positive effect, or how they try to mitigate negative effect. If, for example, we talk about supersonic aircraft.
And also, I think there's a very real threat for the industry as a whole if, let's say, the public opinion and the regulators, pressured by the public opinion, are turned against the industry. And there's a real fear that it happens like with the tobacco industry, for example, that it's labeled as undesirable and all that. So I think that there's a lot of that as well here.
Of course. I mean, I heard this well. It's like aviation is like new oil industry, tobacco and things like that, which actually, honestly speaking, personally, I disagree, because I see how much effort, how much like resources is put into the aviation sector in order to solve this problem with sustainability.
Yes, as well, the sort of capabilities that aviation brings to society as a whole in terms of connecting people and connecting businesses, driving economic growth, etc. But I think that's possibly a topic for a whole other episode of the podcast. But yeah.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, I mean, coming back, sustainability definitely unites all this trends and topics. So, and if you look into the future, of course, we want to believe that, and I'm sure that in some point aviation is going to be sustainable and CO2 neutral. I mean, there are different other concerns we have to consider, like non-CO2 emissions, which we still need to investigate and understand better, because potential impact is even worse than CO2 emissions. So that's something to look at. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are already on it. Research institutions, I don't know, for example, DLR. I mean, it's like a huge institution in Germany, and all across the world, people are thinking about how to solve this problem. So I think the solution is on the way.
Yes. What projects are you working on at the moment? Anything that you're planning to release soon in form of report or analysis?
I mean, we work on some interesting stuff, as I mentioned before, metaverse. So we are thinking about metaverse, trying to come up with some kind of framework where we can map some use cases and understand where it can bring us within the travel mobility industry. We actually work on the big framework. You probably know about this because I think you talked to my colleague Tino before about the Grayton version.
Yes.
So finally, it will materialize from presentations into the written text.
That it's more about, not so much about aviation specifically, but about travel in general and how different lifestyles and ways of organizing travel and work are emerging.
Yeah, I mean, that's all about the kind of mega trends we identify and believe they're happening right now within the, again, travel and mobility industry. And we're working on describing all these trends, and hopefully soon, like I would say soon in like May or some point in May, we will start releasing this insights and the framework, which I think it's give us some interesting insights and kind of frame the current technologies that we see into the kind of concept, and gives us clarity on all these things, which I think is one of the jobs we do as well as a research team, to provide some clarity on what is happening and make it easier to understand and grasp, and also to identify future opportunities for all of us.
I just want to wrap it up by asking something. All this research you do, you put a lot of great work out there, but do you have a business model as TNMT, or all this production of very interesting content is basically a way for Lufthansa Innovation Hub to establish its presence in the broader, let's say, aviation and travel and transportation world? Or what's the ultimate business model that you guys have?
Yeah, there are a couple of points on that one. So the first thing is we don't work on the request, so we define the agenda. So we define what kind of research questions we want to consider and what to actually ultimately publish on TNMT. So we publish, I would say, like 95% of our research on TNMT as well. So we don't really cover that much information from our activities. So talking about the business model, we are publishing content because we believe it's not a secret for anyone. And of course, it contributes into the reputation of Innovation Hub itself. And of course, it helps people in the Lufthansa group as well to understand the latest trends. And of course, after the releasing different articles, we people approaching us, we do some internal sessions, and we help people to understand better what is actually happening on the market. So we're not a profit center, so we don't sell things right now.
You don't do consultation, for example, for external clients?
No, we don't do it yet. Also we have to take into account that the team is quite small. So we are a few people in Berlin. We have 2 people in Singapore. That's basically it. So it's less than 10 people for sure. So that's also we need to take into account when we do things.
Well, in any case, that's great that you are putting all that content out there for everyone that has an interest in this very interesting moment that the aviation industry is going through. People that want to learn more about what you guys do, follow your writings, get your updates, your newsletters, where should they go?
Well, TNMT.com, I would say. That's
TNMT.com. Yes.
That's right. We have a newsletter, bi-weekly newsletter. Please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter, where we provide all the latest updates, what's happening in the travel and mobility industry, plus some insights from our side, what to expect in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Ivan, for this very interesting conversation today. I'm looking forward to reading all this new work that you're going to be releasing in the coming weeks and months.
Sure. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mikhail.
Thank you. Before you go, and if you like this podcast, a quick reminder that it would be absolutely great if you could please give it a rating on Apple, Spotify, or whichever platform you're using, or recommend it to a friend or whomever might be interested. Thank you very much, and see you soon.